Fine, yeah. Okay, so good afternoon all, excellencies, honorables, ladies and gentlemen. I think there's a bit of an echo. We will go ahead. So thank Hopefully we will have an engaging discussion. Thank you to all who are joining us online. We have an interesting setup for all of us, and we trust that it will go well. So for the start of the program, I'm going to have some representatives speaking. And to start us off, we'll have a representative from Norway and Sweden, who happen to be the co-chairs of the Women, Peace and Security Working Group, which is the working group that UN Women is a secretariat for. And these are all the donors who are supporting women, peace and security in South Sudan. So I would like to welcome Urban and Paul. You're welcome to give us some remarks.
Honorable Angelina Teny, Minister of Defense, Honorable Gemma Nunukumba, Minister of Parliamentarian Affairs, Honorable Aya Benjamin Warile, Minister of Gender, Child and Social Welfare, Mrs. Lorna Marie Kaye, Representative for the Civil Society, Excellencies, colleagues of the Diplomatic Corps, international organization, including friends from UN Women, civil society, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Norway and Sweden, in our capacity as co-chairs of the Women, Peace and Security Working Group, are privileged to participate in this event to highlight the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. This is important to remind us of past achievements and experiences, as well as come together for future priorities and visions. The Women, Peace and Security Working Group is created to improve the coordination between donors, UN agencies, IGAD, and institutions established under the revitalized peace agreement. And the purpose is to support the implementation in South Sudan of Resolution 1325 and subsequent UN Security Council resolutions on women, peace and security. So, research has actually shown that women's participation in peace processes helps secure more sustainable and legitimate peace. Women's participation in political processes is also a rights issue, and it is essential in order to have an inclusive government. We are therefore disappointed that the parties so far in South Sudan has not fully adhered to the provision in the peace agreement that requires at least 35% women in political institutions.
We therefore call on the parties to adhere to this provision, to prioritize transitional tasks that guarantee the security and protection of women and girls, and to continue to implement the peace agreement in ensuring sustainable peace for all citizens. We recognize the leadership of important leaders, women leaders of South Sudan present here today. Your example demonstrates that women can and should be national leaders in this country. Our two countries, Norway and Sweden, are united in our commitment to promoting women's rights and women's participation in political processes, not only in South Sudan, but across the world. Women, peace and security was a cornerstone of Sweden's tenure on the UN Security Council in 2017-18, as it will be for Norway in its upcoming tenure on the Security Council in 2021-22. Sweden, as a member of the UN Security Council, ensured that all negotiated mandate renewals for UN missions contain provisions on women, peace and security. And Norway will build on Sweden's good legacy as a member on the Council. We, as co-chairs of the Women, Peace and Security Working Group, reaffirm our commitment to support the equal participation and full involvement of women in all efforts for the maintenance and promotion of peace and security in South Sudan. We are indeed looking forward to this panel discussion on gender equality in this country. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, co-chairs of the Women, Peace and Security Working Group. It is an honor for UN Women to be the secretariat of the group. Now, such an event would not be possible without the generous support of the Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands. And we have the Deputy Ambassador from the Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands who will come and give us some brief remarks. You're welcome, Michelle Deline.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to stand on existing protocol. I can only support what was said by my colleagues who spoke before me, and just want to say that also as the Netherlands, we wholeheartedly support the efforts to implement the resolution on women, peace and security. Because remember, 20 years ago, it was a resolution that was adopted unanimously. It's something that everybody agreed on, and yet it still seems difficult to come to implementation on a grassroots. And remember the name, it's Women, Peace and Security. It's not women, war and insecurity. So the thinking is that women's contribution to peace and security is essential. And I'm very happy that we see all the Sustainable Development Goals here. You know, sometimes we think, oh, women, a gender issue, and we take it a separate track. Not so. It's part of all the individual Sustainable Development Goals where gender plays a crucial role. So indeed, women, peace and security as a positive connotation. And I'm looking very much forward to the discussion here. And well, let me not say anything about man and war and insecurity. Thank you.
And as we're all aware, this event is a partnership between UN Women and the South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum. So I'd like to invite a co-organizer from the Women's Intellectual Forum to tell us a bit more. What is the Women's Intellectual Forum? So Dr. Anne Lomole, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Esther. Honorable ministers, distinguished guests, all protocol observed. My name is Dr. Anne Lomole. I am a pediatrician and an infectious disease specialist. I am a member and the current health moderator for the South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum. Today, I am pleased to be here on behalf of the South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the United Nations Security Council resolution on women, peace and security, and to attend this very important discussion. The active involvement of women in peace processes not only supports peace efforts, but also ensures that a broader spectrum of issues are considered and valued. This is because women take a collaborative approach that cuts across ethnic divides. Using their unique strategies as members of the community and community leaders, South Sudanese women facilitated and played different roles during armed conflicts. They were involved in the struggle for self-determination behind the scenes, where they supported their families with basic necessities, and they also voiced their opinions through various platforms and were in active duty in the front line. South Sudanese women also formed various grassroots organizations that advocated and participated in peace talks, both at the national and local levels. South Sudanese women therefore became the backbones of their societies and took care of their households, ensured food security for their communities, and cared for the sick, the wounded, and nurtured the children. However, in the post-war era, South Sudanese women found it harder to maintain their position and their place in the communities because the society often neglected the role that they had played, not taking into account the important contributions that they made during the Civil War. Despite the odds, the South Sudanese women offer a different viewpoint and draw from their lived experiences as women. They play an important role in shaping concepts by reconstructing and learning from the past, interpreting the present, and mapping out the visions for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce to you the South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum. The South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum is a global nonprofit organization with over 3,000 members. It is committed to realizing a free, just, and equitable society. Founded in the year 2020, this forum drives change and participation by linking South Sudanese women globally through an online dialogue to help solve some of the challenges facing South Sudanese women, not only in South Sudan, but also in the diaspora. The forum brings together South Sudanese professional women from diverse backgrounds and different points of view. It cultivates and supports value-based and purpose-driven leadership among South Sudanese women around the globe and strives to turn ideas into action and impact for our communities around the world. The objectives of the South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum is to promote nationalism and mutual understanding, to unite all South Sudanese women globally, and to creatively engage them in various endeavors such as nation building, development, and women empowerment. The South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum also provides a platform for South Sudanese women to share technical expertise, ideas and opportunities, including training and research opportunities, scholarships, internships, jobs, consultancies. We also support the endeavors and celebrate the achievements of South Sudanese women all over the globe. And currently we are building a database and network of South Sudanese women from every sphere of influence to enhance collaborative efforts. Since our inception, we have live streamed discussions like this one on our forum on various topics and issues affecting South Sudanese women and South Sudanese in general. These topics are discussed by experts from every field drawn from South Sudanese women from across the world. As of today, we have discussed 24 topics, including women entrepreneurship, looking at SMEs and women enterprises, COVID-19 and its economic, social, and cultural impacts on the South Sudanese population, both in South Sudan and the diaspora. We have also discussed gender-based violence in South Sudan, the issues, prevention, and response strategies, agriculture and food security in South Sudan, mental health, South Sudan labor and employment, cancer in relation to women and children's health, South Sudanese women and peace-building efforts, early childhood education and development, and preventing and responding to violence against children and adolescents in South Sudan. As a pediatrician, I am proud to say that our children are not left behind. We also cater to the psychosocial needs of our members weekly through our self-care hour for members who might be undergoing or who might have undergone traumatic events in their lives, which is the reality for most South Sudanese women. We also have standby counselors who are available for the same. Our mission is to strive to provide opportunities for women to connect with and support each other. We facilitate meaningful approaches to networking, and we embrace new ways of enriching our connections and raise the awareness of our members on various issues. We embrace South Sudanese women of various ages, cultures, industries, and professions. We also have a mentorship program where we encourage sharing of experiences, knowledge, skills, challenges, and lessons learned along the way. We encourage and facilitate collaboration within our network and the greater South Sudanese women community. Our vision is to shape the future of this country and of South Sudanese women by providing opportunities for development, fostering valuable connections, and facilitating member success through dialogue and opportunities for career advancement. The South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum has earned a reputation for gathering through online platforms a diverse group of South Sudanese women with expertise in various fields and for them to address some of the most complex issues affecting South Sudan and South Sudanese women. The forum is designed to provoke dialogue that will translate into action and impact in the real world. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now conclude by stating the future of this forum. The South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum is a forum that aims to promote primarily unity and nationalism. Our tribe is the women of South Sudan. We believe that by uniting, we are able to achieve more and go further together. Our members are present in all the 10 states, and some of our members represent grassroots organizations that have been greatly impacted by the discussions on the forum and the networking opportunities this forum has provided. Our members continue to support other women with capacity building and capacity enhancement. And in the future, we hope to collaborate with different women's organizations and various stakeholders to facilitate projects that target South Sudanese women and children and advocate for policies that empower South Sudanese women. We plan to extend our activities by having a visible presence in South Sudan across the states. And in that capacity, we plan to engage in women's service delivery in various fields, including healthcare, education, business and financial security, legal protection, and prevention of gender-based violence, using the diverse expertise that we have within the forum. We will also be involved in grassroots mobilization in education and empowerment and in sensitization and advocacy on various issues affecting South Sudanese women. We will focus on post-conflict reconstruction through the development of policy briefs for all our discussions and policy advocacy in order to influence policy change and lobby for the implementation of these policies to ensure a sustainable impact. The UN Women has supported and continues to support the forum. We remain sincerely grateful. Thank you, UN Women, for supporting the women of South Sudan. We look forward to further partnership with the UN Women and other stakeholders in moving South Sudan towards sustainable peace, stability, and development. This will only be possible through collaboration and realized through the availability of funding and establishment of collaborative partnerships. Once again, we would like to thank our honorable members for attending this discussion, our distinguished guests, the UN Women, our members and the audience for attending this event both physically and virtually through our social media platforms. We thank you all for your continued support and for attending this important occasion. Together, we can. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ann, for giving us an introduction of what the forum is about. Now, last but not least, we'll have Dr. Paulina Chiwangu, Deputy Country Representative, UN Women Officer in Charge, to give us remarks. Dr. Paulina, joining us. You're welcome, Dr. Paulina.
Thank you, Esther. Can you hear me? Honorable Jema Nunu Kumba, Minister of Parliament Affairs. Honorable Angelina Teni, Minister of Defense and Veteran Affairs. Honorable Aya Benjamin Warile, Minister of Gender, Child and Social Welfare. Ambassadors and heads of development from the embassies of Sweden, Norway, Netherlands, and Canada. UN colleagues, women groups, civil society organizations, all excellencies, honorables, good afternoon. As most of you know, last month on the 21st of September, we celebrated the International Peace Day. And during that commemoration, the UN Women Executive Director, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo Nguka, stated that women have historically played an important role in the quest for peace. The Women, Peace and Security Agenda, which marks its 20th anniversary in this year of crisis, provides a framework for sustainable peace. The evidence is very clear, very clear. Having women at peace tables generates greater buy-in and strengthens the accountability for implementation. Women's participation also makes peace more durable because with their input, agreements go beyond the realm of power to the realities of people. UN Women stands with all the women, including young women around the world, upholding peace. From the mothers holding vigil for the disappeared, to the women marching against police brutality, from the women in refugee camps navigating a complex gender landscape, to those negotiating ceasefires all over the world. As you know, this year we commemorate the anniversaries of some of key United Nations frameworks. These include the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action, the 10th anniversary of UN Women's establishment. UN Women establishment are the global champion for the empowerment of women and girls. And as mentioned above, one that is very key to this gathering today is the 20th anniversary of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. Before I talk about United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 in women, peace, and security, during the 10th anniversary of the creation of UN Women, the United Nations Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, stated that within the United Nations family, UN Women has established itself as a strong voice for women's rights, advancing, educating, and pushing all parts of the system to mainstream gender in all our work. UN Women's landmark achievements at the global, national, and local level are many. Let me just highlight a few that stand out. In its short history, UN Women has helped move the needle by supporting more than 175 successful legal reform and 25 constitutional reforms to strengthen women's rights, including property, land, and protection from discrimination and violence. By strengthening access to essential services, including health and legal services, for survivors of violence against women in nearly 60 countries. By deploying 130 experts to investigate conflict-related sexual violence, including secondment to every single UN Commission of Inquiry since 2010, national courts, and the International Criminal Court. This has resulted in some of the first in prosecution of gender-related crimes under international law. By supporting women's meaningful participation in peace processes in South Sudan, in Colombia, in Syria, and Yemen, and several other countries. By building the relationships and platform for women's civil society to engage in the work of the organization. So these are just some of the selected key highlights that this 10-year-old organization managed to achieve. In South Sudan, over the years, UN Women has had the privilege of journeying alongside the women of South Sudan in their search for a peaceful country. We have watched the women of South Sudan travel across the world to raise international awareness of the conflict and seek solutions, develop key frameworks for women's participation, and advocate on the need for women's inclusion. It is important to note that gender provisions in the revitalized peace agreement, including the 35% affirmative action, the allocation of women's enterprise funds, and other gender-sensitive provisions, came due to continuous and difficult advocacy efforts by women across the board, and especially the women of South Sudan. Women's engagement in peace processes globally, whether before, during, or after the conflict, has not always been easy. Despite the many good conventions, agreements, discussions, and events that have taken place, progress is too slow, and political will is not strong enough. Change is not as real as it needs to be. We must aim to close the gap between words and action. As we engage in this discussion, listening from these women leaders of South Sudan, I hope that all of us in this room, in our different capacities, we take the time to reflect and see opportunities to strengthen women's engagement in the peace agreement implementation. It is our hope that we will all take the recommendations raised here to heart and act on them, a great starting point as we all consider how to make our own tangible contributions to women's meaningful engagement in the peace agreement implementation. As we look forward to the complete formation of the revitalized transitional government of national unity in South Sudan, UN Women is committed, fully committed, to work with women and gender equality activists to ensure that women's voices are heard. UN Women continues to lead in multi-generation campaigns like Generation Equality, which demands, amongst others, an end to all forms of violence against women and girls, and their equal participation in political life and decision-making in all areas of life. In South Sudan, our United Nations Cooperation Framework had the empowerment of women and youth as the key priority. As you engage in the discussion and hear from the women's representative in key offices, I hope that you take this time to have honest conversations on what progress has been made around UN Security Council Resolution 1325 and the 35% affirmative action in South Sudan, to understand from them what challenges have been faced and to strategize together to ensure that women's voices, women's concerns, and women's priorities are included in the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement. I wish you all a fruitful discussion. Thank you for being here.
So we are moving to the most exciting part of this discussion that I'm sure all of you have come here for this incredible, esteemed panelists that we have before us today. So I'm going to take the time to introduce them one by one. To my right, I have Honorable Gemma Nunukumba, the Acting Secretary General of the SPLM, and the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs in the revitalized Transitional Government of National Unity. Which is one of the key institutions of the transitional period. Welcome, Honorable Angelina. Next, we have Honorable Aya Benjamin Wawirile, the Minister of Gender, Child and Social Welfare. She served in the Ministry of Agriculture and taught at the University of Juba in the College of Environmental Studies. We are honored to have you here, Honorable Benjamin Wagile. And right next to her, we have Miss Lorna Merikaje, Secretary General of the South Sudan Democratic Elections Monitoring Program, SUDEMOP, and she is the women's representative of the National Constitution Amendment Committee. This is the committee tasked with reviewing all the laws in the transitional period. Lorna also participated in the 2015 peace process as a member of civil society, and we're glad to have her here. Welcome, Lorna. And last but not least, joining us live will be Honorable Lillian Rizek. Honorable Lillian is the founder of the South Sudanese Women Empowerment Network, and she served as a former state minister. And we are very happy to have her here. Beyond affirmative action quotas, what is the SPLM strategy for the women, peace and security agenda in South Sudan?
Stereotypes about the gender roles. Women saw themselves doing roles that were not to be traditionally their roles. And after the signing of the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, we had the opportunity, first of all, to participate in the peace negotiations, which culminated in the signing of the CPA. And thereafter, the women also participated effectively in subsequent processes like the constitution amendment processes, in which the women clearly came out with a demand for affirmative action to ensure their participation in post-conflict Sudan by then. So this came out as a policy, as a law in the national constitution, transitional constitution of Southern Sudan, and later on after independence also. So this has been able to allow the participation of women in the political arena at different levels, at the cabinet, at the parliament, and also at the state at the state level. So the empowerment of women is one of our strategic objectives as a party. and women continue to demand for more, and that's why the percentage was increased from 25 to 35. So talking on how this relates to peace and security, of course, we are talking about participation of women in decision making at all levels. And if you talk about the participation of, women in peace and security, the participation here looks at how women can participate in preventing conflict, how women can participate in peace processes, and how women can participate in the implementation and sustaining peace agreement. So we have seen in the previous peace processes whereby women participated effectively, both those in government and civil society, and also those in other parties to the peace agreement. So this is the effect of the affirmative action of the 25% or now 35%. So we believe that the main objective of this resolution, Resolution 1325, was to ensure the participation of women at all levels in terms of how they can be able to reduce the impact of conflicts on women. Because we all know that in every conflict, women are actually more affected than men. All conflicts are characterized by violence against women. We have also gender-based violence. We have atrocities that affect women during conflict. And that's why we, the women of South Sudan, feel that we have to participate at these levels. And that in the previous peace processes, women were able to, clearly put up their perspective into this agreement, which now culminated also in the provisions that is requiring their participation, the 35% at all levels and in all the mechanisms that are there for the implementation of the peace agreement.
Great. Great, thank you so much for that response. Honorable Angelina Teng, the security sector is known to be one of the biggest sectors in our country. And women, especially in women security, is known to help with effective interventions and reduce the risks for the greater civilian population. You being the Minister of Defense, what does the women peace and security agenda mean for the Ministry of Defense?
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I really want to congratulate the women, South Sudanese, African, and worldwide. 20 years of this resolution 1325 is clearly a big achievement, and we really have to pat ourselves in the back. We still have a long way to go, and our solidarity as women worldwide and supporting those countries that are vulnerable like South Sudan is key and paramount. Ministry of Defense, and what does women, peace and security means for the Ministry of Defense? Twofold. One is to do with compliance with all international legal frameworks that requires the armed forces to I don't know what to call it, but kind of unprecedented level of attacks against women and their rights and violation of their dignity. So this is one aspect, to ensure that the armed forces have an understanding of their obligations and their legal obligations based on not only international instruments, but also our national instruments. We have the penal code, we have our constitutions, we have the laws, all the different laws actually prohibit. We also ratified CEDAW. All of these are legal instruments that the armed forces need to understand and need to know and need to work with those. So this is a responsibility for the Ministry of Defense to ensure that every individual understands that aspect. The other fault is opportunities for women in the armed forces. Definitely, we have a number of women. However, there are lots of challenges. We have a number of women, whether it is within the SSPDF or even the opposition forces and so on. But very honestly, women in the organized forces are marginalized. They play very minimal role. We need to change that. We need to change that. We need to change that status within, let me say, the army. Let me speak on behalf of the army specifically. How do we do that? We have the issue of education. Being uneducated should not be a hindrance for a woman not to continue and to develop and to be part of the organized forces or to be part of the army. As part of the transformation, and it so happened you heard in the introduction that I also share the Strategic Defense Security Sector Review Board, which is working on the white paper for the security sector, particularly characterized with the transformation of the forces. What is transformation? Transformation means giving skills. So to ensure that women in the organized forces have this opportunity to access training so that they're given skills, also education within the organized forces if they are already in the organized forces. We also have to create that conducive environment to encourage young girls, educated young girls, to actually join the army. So far, we need to continue to work to build the confidence of our civil population in our armed forces. This is also another huge task. And that will help women to actually be encouraged to approach and to access jobs within the armed forces and so on. What are we doing right now? With the support of the protection unit of UNMISS, we have a consultant working with us on issues of training, educating the forces, on issues of violence or gender-based violence in conflict, and so on. So we have that support. We have an action plan. We have a training manual, and a consultant who would come and work with us to ensure the mainstreaming of gender in our revised defense policy, as well as the white paper and the legal policy framework for the whole security sector. So those are some of the actions that we're taking. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Honorable Angelina, for that, and for letting us know what the status is at Bilfom. So right next, I would like to invite Honorable Aya Benjamin Warili, our Minister of Gender, Minister of Gender, South Sudan developed the National Action Plan for 3025 back in 2015. It was a 5-year action plan with an expiry date of 2020. It's now 2020. What progress has there been? What have we been able to do as part of the National Action Plan developed 5 years ago?
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be a member of this panel and to participate. Yeah, the government of South Sudan acknowledges that men and women in South Sudan are affected by violence and discrimination differently. And therefore, they also require different ways and different security because they are not identical. After this, you are going to allow me to outline what has been done as a ministry since the development of the National Action Plan. First of all, after independence, the government of South Sudan established the Ministry of Gender, Child and Social Welfare with the mandate to mainstream gender throughout the government institutions and also to focus on creating national policies for implementation. And we also championed the establishment of gender focal points in all government institutions. That is a strategy to operationalize the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. In 2012, the ministry also developed the ministry and the development partners carried out a study on the implementation status of the resolution. And this study informed the development of the National Action Plan for the adoption of the resolution 1325. The Ministry of Gender, Child and Social Welfare also acknowledges that the implementation of the principle of UN Security Council Resolution 1310.
Honorable I, you can be louder, the audience at the back is struggling.
Maybe I remove the mask? Yes. Okay. And this one also opportunities for the newly emerging nation to consolidate efforts of sustainable conflict resolution and peace building. Currently, the government of South Sudan is embarking on a number of efforts to promote post-conflict reconstruction. The efforts include constitutional review process, security sector reform, as well as judiciary and electoral reform processes. Economically, the government has outlined the South Sudan Development Plan and the Poverty Reduction Strategy, both of which detail approaches to economic re-engagement, cross-cutting all these efforts. We have also adopted the National Gender Policy 2013. Economic constraints and ongoing security threats continue to create challenges for the government. So, ultimately, the development impact on the government's ability to promote women's agenda in peace and security. There have also been efforts implementing the resolution 1325 from various development partners. We've been involved with them bilaterally and multilaterally. We've been engaging in building efforts towards raising awareness at various levels among the population of South Sudan. At the national level, the interim constitution bill of right and acknowledges the right to equal treatment for both men and women. Additionally, various government ministries have responded on sexual gender-based violence, directly or indirectly. The Ministry of Gender, Child and Social Welfare has responded to sexual gender-based violence challenges by creating standard operating procedures on reporting, documenting, and investigating sexual gender-based violence cases. We have also developed a guideline for establishment of safe home for gender-based violence survivors. It's yet to be tabled in the Council of Ministers. There are already initiatives around the international campaigns such as the 16 days of activism and no violence against women and children, during which the Ministry of Gender, Child and Social Welfare, development partners, UN agencies, and civil society organizations have partnered to raise awareness. Awareness raising is one of the critical pillars towards addressing sexual gender-based violence. However, that needs to be done to ensure that awareness raising process on the same are conducted continually and systematically. We are in contact with UNMISS to organize these continuous trainings for community members, church leaders, youth, and other organized groups, so that we are able to fight gender-based violence, and the community members themselves should be able to do their policing. And since youth are perceived to be the perpetrators, we are also involving them to reduce on the incidences of sexual gender-based violence. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Honorable Aya, for that intervention. Now, Lorna, moving on to you as a representative of civil society. South Sudan, what role can the civil society play, in particular the women's groups? What role can they play in the achievement of 35% affirmative action and the implementation of 1325?
Thank you very much, Esther.
And let's please speak louder so that the entire room can hear us. We're not using mics today, so it'll be really good if we can. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Esther. And the South Sudanese Women Intellectual Forum. I think this conversation is timely, and it is a conversation that, by engaging in it, we are trying to amplify, and for civil society, what we have been doing is to amplify the voice of the voiceless. And coming back to the question,
I think one of the biggest things that civil society should do or are doing in regards to 35% and the 1325 resolution, the UN Security Council 1325 resolution, is one, to create information and awareness. That is what civil society have been doing. And I think it's what civil society need to continue to do, to create awareness about the provisions, to create awareness about the existence of 35% affirmative action. It is surprising, or it can be disheartening to hear that some parts of the country until today, women or people still do not know that the affirmative action has progressed from 25 to 35. So what the civil society do is to create awareness. However, if you listen to the ministers and their presentation, it's clear that there are several processes that are going on in the country. So the other thing that the civil society do, which I must say that it needs to be enhanced, is to influence those processes, to ensure that citizens' voices are embedded or incorporated into those processes. However, on this, I would like to say that in order to effectively do that, then the civil society need to purposefully participate. Because again, the sector is thin, the sector is mainly voluntary, but there are so many processes that are being done by institutions that are being funded by the country's resources. So in order to meaningfully engage, the civil society have to be quite strategic in doing it. The other thing that I think I would like to say is that the civil society are engaged in capacity enhancement. This has been going side by side with awareness, but I would want to separate that, Esther, that capacity enhancement is key in achieving 35% and realizing implementation of 1325. Because without capacity enhancement, then it's going to be difficult for the beneficiaries to be able to benefit from what is set for them. And I was listening to Honorable Angelina. There are opportunities, for example, within the army, but then are women aware of those opportunities? Are women able to seize those opportunities? So the civil society come in to enhance the capacity, create awareness about those opportunities, and be able to facilitate the beneficiaries of those opportunities to seize the opportunity and make use of it. However, the other thing that I would like to add is that when this is happening, it's important to create partnership. And this partnership is not only between the civil society, the established civil society organizations and the women, but also partnership between the community and these institutions. So the civil society come in to enhance that and to enhance capacity of the communities to be able to create partnership between them and the institutions and realize the real purpose of having those institutions, which is one, providing services to the people. The other thing that civil society does is to be able to research. The civil society does research, and women organizations research a lot. There's a lot of information with women organizations. However, that information is not fed into the reform process in the country, then it becomes a waste. So I would not say that not enough of that is being done, but I think we need to intensify feeding that into the national processes. And I'm glad to say that the RRCs, the current peace agreement, is slightly better than the previous peace agreement, because then the civil society got opportunity in being in different mechanisms. And through those mechanisms, it's now possible for us as civil society to be able to channel the information that has been gathered through different research initiatives, because we have institutions that predominantly research. Where does that information go? So those are some few things I would like to say right now. But then with the opportunities that have come through those mechanisms, one of the things that the civil society have been doing, and I think my colleagues in the audience and those online will confirm this, is that we still need to develop our strategies better. We need to intensify strategic engagement with the processes, not with individuals, but with the processes and the institutions that are championing the reform and transformation agenda, because that's the only way we can be able to embed women's interest into the reform and transformation agenda. And women's interest, to me, goes beyond 35%. I usually say with my colleagues at Sudemo, we say that 35% is the bare minimum. So thinking that 35% is the bare minimum, how do we then make sure that women participation is mainstreamed beyond the minimum? And I think that can only be realized through setting clear priorities. And this now is for the women, the society, the institutions, and the civil society organization. Thank you very much.
So, Honorable Lillian Rizik, as Lorna was explaining that women and the 35%, it is the bare minimum. But we're also aware that a huge part of South Sudan is in the diaspora. What role can women in the diaspora play in the women, peace and security agenda? But beyond that, do you agree that the diaspora needs to be encouraged to participate in rebuilding in South Sudan, and how should they be engaged in this rebuilding of the country? Honorable Lillian, over to you.
All right, thank you so much for the opportunity. I would like to thank the UN Women and the South Sudan Women's Intellectual Forums for organizing this event, which is very timely as the world are celebrating 20 years of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. For whatever reason that the women or South Sudanese in general left their country, they remain really connected and attached to South Sudan and to all events on the ground. And this connection tends to be more in terms of social responsibilities. So we are all outside of the country, but yet we are connected. Our heart and mind is always at home, following events and trying to improve and influence things as much as we can. And an example of that, the event that we're attending right now is being organized by the South Sudan Women's Intellectual Forum, and that gave us a platform to voice our concern, being in the diaspora or at home, and discuss a lot of issues. Even the implementation or the ratification of the CEDAW, the Conventions of Elimination of All Forms of Against Women, was initiated by a group of women from the diaspora who visited Juba in 2008, and they were able to engage with the women at home, and they marched the street of Juba demanding the ratification of CEDAW. And there are so many other examples I can give you to show you how women in particular, not necessarily all South Sudanese in diaspora, are very much engaged and they are using their unique position to advocate for peace and stability in South Sudan. In terms of how the diaspora can actually participate, at the moment, the World Bank estimated there are more than 4.7 million South Sudanese out of the country, and 2.5% million are refugees. So the remaining are scattered all over the world. So, and these people, they are engaged in transferring funding in a monthly basis to South Sudan. So you could see, if we have a remittances policy in place, you would see how the diaspora could actually participate in the development processes, because most of the people, there's an estimation, the study that's been done, more than $500,000 that has been transferring in a monthly basis to South Sudan, because we all have families still living there, so we have to support them. Even the people who are working in South Sudan, who are engaged with the international NGOs or the UN agencies, they still have to transfer money back to their families. So in that process, South Sudan is not necessarily using the fees that comes from all these transfers or these remittances. So if we have a remittances policy in place, South Sudan could actually really benefit from the diaspora. And an example of that, you see countries like Ghana. When Ghana got its independence, the diaspora were very much involved in building the country because they came in with their expertise. They have better chances in terms of education and skills. So, and you could also see a country like Ethiopia, which are really right now benefiting from the expertise of the diaspora. What we need in South Sudan is a national development policy that takes in consideration the role of the diaspora and provide opportunity on how we can really engage and how we can provide the necessary needed skills.
Great. Thank you so much, Honorable Lillian, for that intervention. So I'd like to take it back to the panelists in the room, and I'll give us one round of questions before I open it up to the audience, because I'm sure you have a number of questions. Please let us keep it brief and go straight to the point. So Honorable Nuno, I have one quick question for you, and I'm sure it has come up a couple of times. So the chairperson of the SPLM increased the affirmative action quota from 25% to 35%. However, with the SPLM as the biggest party in the former incumbent Tigonu, it has been noticed that the recent ministerial and gubernatorial appointments have not met the 35% quota. Is there a reason as to why this is the case? And are there any strategies in place to be able to address this in the upcoming appointments?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very common question. SPLM and also Minister of Parliamentary Affairs. First of all, the agreement provides for 35% women participation at all levels. If you come to the executive, the agreement says at least 6 women should be part of the cabinet from the Artigonu quota. The Artigonu is made up of SPLM and other political parties. In terms of allocation of the ministerial positions, SPLM had 16. So if you calculate 35% of 16 is about 5 point something. And the SPLM had appointed 5 women from the 16. So the gap came from the other parties who were supposed also to submit the name of women for the 4 remaining seats for Artigonu. Unfortunately, the men nominated themselves, and that's where the gap, how the gap was created. This must be understood. From the SPLM part, they fulfilled their promise. Now, because of course it's difficult for us because each party has the right to do their nomination. And that's why we told women from other political parties also to be assertive and voice their voices within their political parties. So that's one area. Coming to the issues of governance, SPLM had six governors, and unfortunately we wrote all men. It's a challenge, but we are addressing that within our party. We have been engaged with our chairman, who is also His Excellency the President, on this issue. Women have met him and raised the issue. So we are working very hard to ensure that this is corrected. And he promised the women that this situation will be corrected in the course of the implementation of the peace agreement. In terms of the remaining positions, again, women also came up very clearly and put up their proposals as to how they would like to see themselves participating in the remaining appointments, especially, well, at the national level, we have other institutions that are yet to be distributed among the parties, like the commissions. We have the National Assembly coming up soon. So for us also as a party, we are going to make sure that really this 35% is implemented within the remaining positions. The same for the state governments. We have already calculated the allocations for each party. Again, we may have a challenge because at the state level also, all the portfolios are distributed among the parties. SPLM has its own quota, and within that, the president has clearly, the chairman of the party has clearly given directives to the governors to ensure that 35% is reflected in the cabinet and all other constitutional posts at the state levels. We will also find some challenges in positions like the speaker, for example. We have also, because we have 10 states, the SPLM will have maybe like 5 speakers, and then the rest is also distributed to the other parties. So we will try our best as a party to make sure that we respect this provision. But again, it will be difficult because the other small parties normally, when they are asked to do nomination, most of these parties are headed by men. And that's one of the challenges we are facing, that most of the women participate at the party structures at lower levels. So the chairpersons and the secretary generals and the rest are all male. And therefore, when the opportunity comes for nominations to positions, automatically the men nominate themselves. So we need to remain vigilant as the women within their respective political parties and raise their voices to ensure that that does not happen. But for the SPLM, of course, I can confidently say that we will try our best to make sure that from the 5 speakers, at least we should have maybe 2 speakers from our quarter. The same for other positions. So we are working on it within our respective political parties. So I don't want to be asked again after the establishment of the state government. So it's a challenge to me because the women said, look, Gemma, you are there. You know, you are the acting secretary general. How did that happen? You didn't talk enough. So I don't know how I can convince them, but I'm working hard with the rest of the women to make sure that this is correct. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. I'm sure you expected that question was going to come your way. But we do have it on record that the SPLM is working to correct this, and all of us in the room and watching live, we will be looking out for it in the upcoming appointments. Sure. We are watching keenly and carefully. Sure. So I'll go to the Honorable Minister of Defense. When it comes to national budgeting, defense and security spending takes the bulk of South Sudan's expenditure. How can this phenomenon be leveraged by financing policy to become one key way from commitment to action in your ministry?
Thank you very much again. Yes, we are on record as people who are bleeding the resources of the country, and maybe in the past, maybe because of all the crises that have been happening and so on and so forth. But the ministry does have a lot of challenges as well. We would definitely like to use the opportunity to use this privilege that we have. However, I want to give you some not very good news. You know, the envelope this year for our budget is very low, and for very obvious reasons, and I think all of you are aware. Now, the Ministry of Defense has been, for budgetary reasons this year, we've been lumped together with a number of other institutions in the security sector, namely DDR, Mine Action, and National Security. And the budget ceiling that has been given to all those institutions together, the budget ceiling given to those institutions combined together is actually less than the budget ceiling of the Ministry of Defense alone last year. Mind you, this year we have a lot of other activities. We have the unification process that is going on, which will be an increment in chapter 1 and the numbers of people. We have the transformation process of the armed forces, which is also a requirement by the agreement. We have the implementation of the agreement as a whole, and so on. So we have a number of activities that have not been there in the past. One of which is ensuring gender mainstreaming. So we're going to struggle this year with a very minimal budget to see to it that gender mainstreaming and inclusion of women takes the rightful share, and so on. So, but I want to tell you also that, you know, now that being an insider, it has always been said that about 40% of the budget of this country goes to security. That's not what I found. Education, and so on and so forth. You have seen them, you know, wearing uniforms like cocktails. So we're not in a good shape. We're not in a good place with regards to resources. That I must put. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much, Honorable Angelina, for that intervention. Maybe it's different from what you see outside.
When you go in, you see something different. So thank you for shedding light on that. So Honorable Aya Benjamin Warile, we have a room that is half men, half women. There are a number of men here. How can we engage men as champions to support and promote the better status of women in this country? Because they are supposed to be our allies. How best do we engage men in this push for gender equality?
Men are very key in this. If we have to get women involved in any activity or at any level, men need to be involved. I would say first, let's listen to women. In most cases, men don't listen to, they don't get to understand women, they don't get to know what experiences they have. We have to listen to women more and get to understand them and get to know their experiences. That is very important because for some reasons, we believe that women don't know. But if you get to listen to them and allow them to air what they feel or what they know or what they think, then you will get to understand them. We normally are put down by men. So if we understood, I think that will be one of the best ways of getting women to where they're supposed to be.
Great. Thank you so much, Honorable Aya, for that intervention. Now, for Ms. Lorna Merikaji, we have talked about the Ministry of Defense having the bulk of the spending, but now one thing that we are aware when we come to the 13th action plan, South Sudan developed its national action plan, but it was never costed. And because of that, implementation made it difficult. Now, why is gender responsive important in the implementation of the 1325 resolution and the 35% affirmative action? Why do we need to have budgets allocated to them?
Very much, Esther. And I think I'm glad that you are raising this issue. Why are we not able to realize gender mainstream? And as the minister was speaking, I remembered this billboard that costed our colleague Guru Shuen, where is the money? That's exactly what I'm asking, because when you look at the budget, a huge percentage of that budget on paper has gone to security. And yes, Honorable Minister, we see the soldiers on the road and it's not adding up. So the question we're asking is, where is the money going? And I'm glad that you have also not found where the money has gone so that we can look for the money together. I think gender budgeting is very important, Esther. It's a concept that we need to embrace as a country. And I like what Dr. Ann said, that our children are not left behind. Can we say that the country is not left behind? Because gender budgeting is a concept that many other countries have embraced. And you realize that budget is directly related to decisions and directly related to services to the people. And money is power. Until we start looking at that money in relation to women and looking at it holistically, trying to ask ourselves that the way this money is allocated, the way these resources are allocated, does it take us towards equality? I'm seeing SDGs here. I'm glad that you brought the SDGs here. Are we seeing SDGs as South Sudanese? So for me, I think it's high time that we are able to bring women and men interest on table, not as begging, but as equal citizens. And gender budgeting will help us do that, Esther. And I think one of the things that we need to do is to start looking at the impact. Every year when a budget is passed, what is the impact of that budget to the people? I think that is a critical question to ask. Number two is that we need to ask ourselves, I know I stand to be corrected by honorable ministers, but I know that in this country we have departments for planning. Do those departments, research and planning, do those departments bring in sex disaggregated data? Because that is where we are losing it. Until we start putting a system in place that will bring sex disaggregated data, until we streamline budget making process. I was just listening to Honorable when she said that this year the ceiling is much less than last year. And when are we talking? This is October. Budget is supposed to have been passed end of June because the financial year is from 1st July to June 31st. So the moment we don't streamline that, you realize that we miss out the point. And unfortunately, women are on the losing end because then budget process is initiated in a hasty way where data is not analyzed to inform the decisions made for allocating ceiling. And that is where gender budgeting will be able to help us to allocate ceilings with the thinking of men and women, but also thinking of youth, and within youth, looking at the young women and young men. That particular understanding of our population and allocating resources based on the interests of the population is the only way that South Sudan can progress and grow. Because imagine today we will allocate funds for youth, but we've not allocated funds. The funds allocated is not towards service that benefit young women within that age bracket. You realize that as they exit that age bracket, they still go with their disadvantaged position, and at the end of the day, they don't get to realize the benefit of being a citizen. Then that is when inequality comes in. I would say that if you look at 1325 Esther, it's time we sit back and interrogate 1325 again. And I like what you have said. We have NAP, National Action Plan, but we have not costed it. Until we cost that, then we'll be able to know that it's not only paper, it has to be grounded. And grounding every idea has budgetary allocation, has monetary implication. That implication is what we should be able to retrieve. And I think as I sit here today, I still say that gender budgeting is the only way for us to go with that. I had one of the most disappointing statements one day. I was told that public finance is gender neutral. And just because, yeah, it was outrageous. But I think to me that was a clear indication of where we're coming from as a country. And it's important for us to start having these conversations. And I call upon my civil society colleagues and development partners, let us start having conversations around gender budgeting with the national institutions, because they are the ones that are going to utilize the resources and provide services to the people. Maybe if I can add something a bit, Esther, you'll see that in defense, I'm glad that Honorable Minister have said that there are opportunities. But then even if the ceiling is increased, where does it go? You see, that's a question. Where does it go? If it goes to defense, but then it's not paying attention to those women and how to tailor trainings and to tailor programs that will be able to bring those women in the mainstream. If they're still being treated on the periphery, then we're missing the point. So one of the other things that we will need to do is to ensure that women's interest is mainstreamed. And mainstreaming women's interest starts from understanding the legal framework. What is the legal framework that provides for that particular institution, and how is resource allocation done, and how is budget execution done? Until we understand that, it will be difficult for us to mainstream women's interest into this process. And I think it's something that requires focus, and you and women, I want to call you out on this. It's something that you should be able to help the institutions in this country, and especially the women activists and institutions that are advocating for women's interests, to be able to focus on that and redirect the focus of decision making in this country. I realize that one of budget 2018 to 2019, you realize that there are ways that citizens can engage. There are ways that women interest can be channeled even when budget is tabled at Parliament. It's about knowing where is this women's interest. And I am saying out of experience, Esther, we pushed and we got tax dropped on sanitary towels and sanitary materials. That is gender budgeting, because then we are doing that to be able to make the environment conducive enough for women in the system, across the system, to be able to participate and contribute and also benefit from what the country is achieving as a whole. So gender budgeting is something that needs to be mainstreamed and need to be included into budget processes in this country, Esther. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Lorna, for that intervention. There's a statement that you say that we need to put the money's power.
Yes.
And we need to look at money in relation to women. Yeah?
Yeah.
That is very key. And I think we've all taken that into consideration. Now, as we prepare to have Lillian make an intervention, any members of the audience who have questions, please think about them, and we'll come to you right after. So, Honorable Lillian, what challenges are facing the women in the diaspora from uniting and having unified voices with the women in South Sudan? And what recommendations do you have for both groups of women to work together moving forward?
Thank you. I just wanted to add to what my colleague Lorna just mentioned. Gender mainstreaming not only requires a framework, but it also requires a political will and strong institutions, which honestly we don't have right now in South Sudan. So a country that emerged from a long history of oppression and a long history of inequality, people, and especially the women, expected the country to lay its foundation on equality, on fairness among all its citizens, and especially the women. Given the fact that women right now, they are making more than 60%, almost 65% of the population. So in order to have a sound policy, you need to include that views of that segment into the policy-making decision. Coming back to your question in terms of challenges facing the women in the diaspora, first, let me just explain this. I listen to everybody that's talking about women, and we are treating women as a homogeneous entity, and we are not, because there are differences between women. There are educated women, there are women that are not educated, they are young, they are youth. We have women living in the rural areas, women living in the urban areas. So the needs of women itself, it's not a unified need. So we have different needs and various expectations and skills. And having that in mind, whatever that happens in South Sudan right now, it affects the diaspora immediately with whatever politics that is happening. If you realize these days, you see a lot of hate speeches in the social media, and the dysfunction of the social fabric among the diaspora themselves, because they're following what is happening back home. So this is a main challenge. But despite of that challenge, a lot of women organizations are able to bring people together. So the main challenge is facing them is the politics that is happening home, and that is being spilled over or somehow is affecting the community over. But among all of this, we see also a lot of activity in terms of trying to bring women together. In terms of recommendations of how we can engage more women, because all of what we are talking about right now, if we don't have strong institutions. The institutions are the one who will carry out these policies. If we don't have strong institutions in place, all we talked about will be we are just talking. We are just having a nice discussion online. But what creates a weak institutions is the conflict. So stability is the most important thing. South Sudan needs to be stable, and so that we can have a strong institutions in place. And to move the agenda of the women, peace and security forward, there need to be establishment of a women and girls council. Yes, we have a Ministry of Gender, which I really appreciate its role, but if we carry out an analysis and the effectiveness of all these policies that we have in place, we would not see a lot of this has been implemented. There is not much impact with these policies, even the National Action Plan or the gender policy plans, and it does not necessarily have the inputs of the rural women in it. Yes, we have created these documents, but they remain in the shelf. So they are not necessarily impacting the lives of the women on the ground. So, but if we have a council at the national level, and this National Council on Women and Girls at all the 10 states, they will be able to advise the government on what is really going on in terms of gender mainstreaming. And to have more women voices included on the national policies, we probably have to have more women coming into the leadership, because we don't have a check and balance system in place right now. Most of these women that are being appointed, and I appreciate them very much, and I'm very proud of them, and I hope we have more women, but they are basically appointed into these positions. So that means we are leaving a large number of other women who are also qualified coming into the place. And then we also have to train that who are left out so that they can come. So if we happen to have an election in South Sudan, we will be able to nominate a qualified women so that they can run for offices. And then we will be much more represented. So the women themselves will have a voice on who they really want to represent them in this position. So this is just my few recommendations.
Great. Thank you so much, Honorable Lillian Rizik, for that intervention. And now I'd just like to invite the audience in the room. Does anyone have any question that they'd like to ask? Okay, Rajab Mohandi's hand fast up. So Rajab Mohandis, I'll take a question from you. Then I saw Lydia Minagano raising up her hand for a question. So I'll take the two first. Let me take the two first. Yes, Rajab, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My first question goes to Honorable Chairman. Well, seen situations where kinds of so much around types of appointments. So I wanted to seek clarification if the political parties now share their roles of influencing appointments with communities or community parties, if I can call it. The second is a question to Honorable Minister of Defense. The Eagle House and Bilcom at large appears to be one of the places you see that appears to be so peaceful here in South Sudan. When you get there, you don't see weapons and you see discipline and a good environment. But could this be transferred to the outcome, particularly the court martials, tend to indicate that the army and in their various posts are also involved in creating insecurity for women. And finally, to the Minister of Gender, you, I think, will be the custodian of the agenda of the 35% affirmative action. So I was just wondering if there is an arrangement in place at the ministry to be able to remind the government and all parties to the disagreement of their responsibilities and possibly the shares they are supposed to produce for women in their allocations or appointments. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Sun. I have one question to the Honorable Minister of Gender. First of all, I'm glad that 20 years later we're still talking about the Security Council resolution, and from the discussion, it's clear that we have not yet reached there, but it's good that we're talking about it because this is the process of us reaching to the destination. My question is in regard to the National Action Plan. From the briefing that was given to us by the Honorable Minister of Gender, we have clearly made some gains and achievements, but we have not achieved it all. And given that the National Action Plan is currently under the review process, what new strategies can be incorporated into the National Action Plan to ensure that we achieve greater success in the future? And how do you envision the role of international partners in the process of the review? And also, how do you ensure that the voices of young women and women at the grassroots is incorporated in the process of the review of the National Action Plan?
Great. Thank you so much, Lydia. I'm going to have to repeat that for our online audience. So there was a question to Honorable Nunu Kumba about the time for appointments and community leaders. How can we leverage that lobbying that takes place during that time? But I hope the Honorable has captured it clearly. Then there is a question from Rajab Mohandis still to the Minister of Defense at the Eagle House Bill Farm appears to be one of the most peaceful areas, but this does not seem to transfer to the outposts where the army has been seen to cause insecurity for women and girls. How can we transfer this? So what linkages can be made to that? I'm just trying to paraphrase it better. And there was a question to Honorable Aya. Is there any arrangement and what is the role of international partners, and how are they ensuring at the ministry to incorporate the voices of the young people? This is just a brief summary of the questions that have been asked from the audience in the room to the honorable panel. And I'm going to just take 2 questions from online audience that I'm going to share with the ministers, and they can respond to it at once. So I have a question here from Lee. And the question is, what is the Ministry of Defense doing to ensure that rape cases and sexual are reduced? That is directed to the Honorable Minister of Defense. And let me see if there's another question. Yes, let's just take that for now from the online audience. So panelists, I give that back to you. We can start with Honorable Nuno.
Thank you very much, moderator. Regarding the issue of communities lobbying for appointments. Yeah, it is true, you know, in South Sudan, we are still a young democracy, and most of our people have not yet internalized the importance of doing things through institutions. So when time comes for sharing the national cake, every community would like to see themselves being represented, and they think the best thing to do is to come as communities. But we are trying to address this as a party, that everything needs to be institutionalized, that it is the party that nominates its candidates for any constitutional post or any other position. So we as a party are trying to ensure that this the issue of communities does not continue. We are trying to make sure that all nominations should come through the party structures. So I think that's what I can say. It is true that happens, but in any political, every party has its own political dynamics, and we are trying to address that. Of course, this past government, the formation of the government, which has been established, we were able to vet the party. Everybody was vetted through the party, especially the governors and ministers were vetted through the party leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The question from Mohandis Rajab, how we can transfer that environment of tranquility in Bilham to the rest of the country. Yes, it's transferable. It's transferable, but we need to, there are a number of challenges. We can do this through the transformation process. Now, the SDSR is going to come up with a roadmap for the transformation process. So we're going to have sets of rules and regulations as part of policy to ensure that weapons are not moved out of where they're supposed to be. We're supposed to have armories where we are supposed to keep those. This also will have an implication, a cost implication. The welfare of the army is very, very important. You see, when you have armed forces whose salaries is not allowing them to make end meet, you know, sometimes it's very, very difficult to keep them under control. They will have to go and find ways of making ends meet. When I'm saying this, I'm not saying through crimes, but for example, you know that our forces are engaged in activities such as cutting of woods to make charcoal, you know, fishing in the river, and so on and so forth. You can't really blame them. So as a government, we have an obligation to see to it that we take care of the welfare of our forces. Now we can be in a position to actually impose a number of things. Personally, I have this ambition. Really, my ambition is sooner than later, I would like to see our armed forces participating in peacekeeping mission. And you know what that means. It means also addressing the question that was asked by Lip, how to reduce the rape. One of the things that, you know, when it comes to like international peacekeeping missions, if your army have a history of sexual violence, gender-based violence, is always a red flag. So we have that challenge to change that image through transformation, through giving skills, through addressing the issues of well-being and welfare, and so on. Is going to be a process, but we can do it together. We are already embarking on the area of the improvement of relations, civil-military relations, and so on. So there are a number of things. I want to quickly just go to something that was said by Lorna earlier to do with budgeting. Anything by way of policy, anything you want to put by way of policy has an associated cost. So if we talk of gender mainstreaming, it has an associated cost. If institutions don't budget for those, then those institutions are not serious. This is one thing. To do with appointments, it was said that, you know, people in political position are appointed, and especially women. I want to say this has to do with the parties and their internal democratic processes. Like in my party, for example, we do go through a process, which is a democratic process. If you're not a member of the party, definitely you cannot take part. But if you want to have a say in appointments of people or women in executive, please join the political parties and work to ensure that these political parties have internal democratic processes whereby women are allowed to decide and choose their leaders within those parties. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The first question was about the 35%. As a ministry, gender challenge, welfare. Gender challenge, welfare. We know that, and everybody is aware. The VPs, we have 1 female. Ministers, we have 9. Deputy, 1. Governor, we have only 1 governor. We are concerned about that, and we've written letters to all the parties to the agreement, reminding them of what we expect them to do. So we are looking forward to see this implemented. Regarding the NAP, yes, it has. It's under review. I know that it's at the early stage, but I know the way we've always done it. We involve our partners in the process, and mostly, as a ministry, our budget is always limited, and our development partners play a very big role here by supporting us financially. We are going to listen to the voices of the women and girls at the grassroots level because the process is consultative. So everybody is going to be involved.
Great. Thank you so much for those interventions. And so I'm going to take one last question from the audience. Wow. I have 4 hands up and
I have 4 hands up.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Okay, I saw her hand up.
Okay,
One question straight to the point. I'll take.
Oh,
I want to be very cognizant of time. I really want to be very cognizant of time. So just ask your question. Or okay, which hands are raised? I saw your hand. I saw Alwell's hand. 1, 2, 3. The 3 of you just state your questions very quickly, straight to the point. And I'll take one last question from the online audience. And the ministers will respond to it, as well as our civil society representative and our diaspora colleague. They'll just give their closing remarks embedded with their response to that question. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much.
And kindly introduce yourself.
My name is Inagomo Bridget. I'm glad to congratulate the Honorable Jones for the time I have been appointed at the national level. However, my clarification to her is, could she help me find out why the same women keep coming whenever there's appointment at the national government? What if is there any possibility to get new ladies coming to join those, all the ladies who have been in the service before, so that we also, get things? Thank you.
Next step.
My name is Anna Minyan. I'm a medical sister. I'm not part of any of the organizations that promote peace building and conflict resolution. But I have that in my heart, and so I find myself invited in most cases to speak to my case, and I try to contribute in that capacity. So I have only one question, and it goes to the Minister of Gender. And also it goes to Minister of Defense. They will answer and ask. So basically, in the past few months, about 2 or so, there was allegations on social media about, this one goes to the Minister of Defense, allegations about the government of South Sudan permitting its soldiers to rape women as a form of payment because they were not able to pay their salaries. So I do not see any response from the government. And so I was just wondering, because there are instances where you stay in these spaces where they were subjected to these violations. Are there spaces, are there shelters where the government houses the survivors?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you introduce yourself? Can you introduce yourself?
Yes. The question is regarding women, regarding religious gender rights, institutions. And as our needs, we concern that we have from women I will speak immediately. The market is dominated. So, as I recited, they have around you gotta have a thing. They have around 2%. It has 3% from the additional allocated to what?
women economic empowerment. So I would like to find out from us, do we have that budget allocated for women economic the money in this nation? You know, this 35% affirmative action we have in our country, it's not actually 35% population of women, it may be 1%, because 35% is the calculation of the cost in the government. But the really number of women, it may be 1%. The same thing with the 65%. So if that policy is not in place, maybe you will need to, come up in your ministry. That's why they have to be allocated for women economic empowerment, and it has to be handled in mechanism through the private sector, so that it may help the ratio of corruption. By putting it in private sector, it will go like to the banking system, credible banks, because they can know how to help this women through microfinances, foundation programs. So now
Great, thank you so much. That was the last question from the audience. And I'm going to take one question from the online audience. And this is from Sabrina from the US, directed to all the panelists. And it says, women are believed to be peacemakers. What role are you playing to bring peace to South Sudan? It's going and zooming into the individuals. What role are you playing to bring peace to South Sudan? Now, let me repeat the questions that were asked in the room for the online audience. So Bridget had a question for the Acting Secretary General of the SPLM, Honorable Nunu Kumba. She asked, there were 5 women, as she mentioned, who had been appointed. Why are they the same familiar faces being appointed? Then there was a question from Alwel Mayang, one to the Minister of Gender, basically finding out, are there safe spaces for women survivors of sexual and gender-based violence? And she had a question for the Minister of Defense, mentioning that there have been allegations on social media of the government conducting rape, commanding the soldiers to conduct rape as a form of payment for salaries. And there has been no response from the government. So she wanted to find out from the minister if she's been aware of this and does the government intend on responding to this. So I believe those are all the questions, and I would like the panelists to respond to them as they give their closing remarks. So I will start again with Honorable Nunu Kumba.
Thank you very much. The appointment of the 5 women is the choice of the SPLM. And I think the question I would have thought that you would have asked why the number is not increased. That one again, that one will be helpful. That one will be helpful. So that is the choice of the SPLM to have those women there. And I think what we should be talking about is to increase, because the 35% is just the minimum. It says at least 35%, but we need to have more voices to demand for more representation of women at all levels. In terms of what role we the women are playing here, really, I think every South Sudanese woman would wish to have peace in this country, because it's in our interest as women that this country is peaceful, given the fact that whatever happens in terms of conflict, it is the women that the women are the ones who suffer most. So we are trying our best as much as we can to mobilize, to raise the issues. Even during the SPLM war, women played very significant role in advocacy, going all over the world, raising the issues and calling upon the parties to the conflict to come to a negotiating table. And that we also participated in the negotiation itself. So again, in the recent war that just ended, women also have tried their best to, lobby, advocate for peace negotiations, and also their participation in it and their demand for their representation in the process. and then their participation in the post-conflict reconstruction program. So this is what I can say in terms of the question that came from the online participants. You see, the issue of effective participation of women really has a lot to do with the issue of funding. Because looking at the UN resolution, the UN Security Council resolution 1325, we have also seen that there is a budget issue there, because the UN itself should be able to provide enough funding to the agencies, for example, the UN Women, so that they can support the national action plans. I was the Minister of Gender until I think February. That national action plan could not be implemented. The strategies are there, but it couldn't be implemented fully because of lack of funding. And also the UN agencies are also limited in terms of funding. But I think we would like really to appeal to the UN to provide adequate funding for the implementation of this NAP. Every ministry has a gender focal point, and the Ministry of Gender is the overall is the main ministry that mandated to implement this protocol. They also have national policies that guide all of us in our respective ministries. So again, we just need to coordinate our work with the civil society. The Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs is actually one of the only institution that has a mandate to link with the civil society in terms of civic education, empowerment of women. So again, I'm also a new minister in that ministry. We are already engaged in conversation with some civil society to develop some joint programs to promote empower women in politics, build their capacities. Also, as a ministry, we are mandated to build the capacities of parliamentarians, both men and women, and we're focusing on women empowerment or building the capacity of the women caucuses to be able to effect their parliamentary responsibility effectively, link them with the regional women parliamentary caucuses, and also in the region and beyond. So once again, I thank you for inviting us for this panel, and wish to encourage the forum to continue engaging all of us in important topics like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There was a question to do with rape being used as incentives. I think if you have followed recently, the SSPDF had established court-martialed in Ye River, and about 20 men were convicted. They lost their ranks. They have been dismissed from the armed forces. So I just want to say that there's no hiding place. If you had engaged in such activity, there was the question from online about the role we play in peace. Basically, everything that I'm doing in the Ministry of security sector is the backbone of, if you like, sustainable peace. To ensure that this peace is sustainable, we have to make sure that the security sector is put right. So day and night, everything that I do, I'm involved in, has to do with bringing about peace. Sustainable development means also security. which has to have a direct link with women, peace, and security. So apart from the fact that personally I'm engaged in a number of activities and mechanisms of peace agreement. I just as by way of my last word, number one, I want to encourage women, and especially women who are in civil society. Civil society is a stepping stone for something. In civil society, you can influence, but your influence is marginal because you are not part of the decision making. You want to be part of the decision making, you want to make a difference. Yes, be in civil society, but please have a strategy to join political parties. You will enhance the political parties, you will support, you will be a big addition to the women who are within the political parties, and you will definitely make a difference. So I am appealing to our women in civil society. There are some of these women have been in civil society for the last 20, 30 years. We've all been in civil society. But you know what? You need to move on. Move on, join politics. Do something exciting. It's very, very exciting. I'm telling you. I also want to encourage our members, civil society, to get a lot of support from our international partners. Women in politics hardly get any support. I'm trying to encourage our international partners to also, they talk about affirmative action, 35% participation of women, and so on. But most of their support is geared towards civil society. For goodness sake, you also want these resources to have a bigger margin of success. Just dive in and support women in politics. I'm also encouraging some of our civil society organizations to champion, take it on and say, I am going to be just engaging in supporting women in politics, engaging them, training them, giving them opportunities, helping mobilize women from elsewhere to join politics so that they can have a bigger bearing in decision making. This is I think this is very, very important. And I'm forever appealing to our women to that end. One last thing to the women of South Sudan. In political parties, power structure divides. She has her party, they have their visions and their ideals. I have my party, we have our visions, we have our ideals, we are fighting for certain things, but there's something called a minimum women agenda. I am encouraging our women. We started something last time, but it hasn't taken off. Let it take off. We can design, if you like, our agenda as women, what we would like to see, and how we can support ourselves even from within the different parties. She was talking about we want to ensure that we rectify the situation of the appointment of women in the SPLM. I have other issues that I would also need support in. So we can work together here. There's something to work for together, even though we come from different political parties. This will be my last word. Thank you.
The question was about safe homes for GBV survivors. We don't have shelter for GBV survivors, but we work with partners who have some shelters. This is a concern to us as South Sudanese. Most of these survivors are either ladies escaping from forced marriage or some other, like the case we had in Gurei, armed men came and did that to her, and then she wasn't feeling safe there. It's a concern to us. We don't have a place for them, but we have land, and we are planning to put up a structure to accommodate them and pursue their cases. The Minister of Defense has talked about these armed men. They are our biggest problem. So I hope that, and it's my prayers that we fix the problem there so that these women are safe. Women economic empowerment. We actually discussed that with her. We don't have any budget for that, but we are working on what the agreement has given us. There's a module that we've prepared, we've developed as a ministry. We are finalizing it, then we'll present it to the Council of Ministers. It's a good idea. I've shared it with some people. We are going to work on that. I deal with the most vulnerable people in the society. And if you go out there, you will see the people who need peace most. And because we interact, we talk about peace, and we talk about why we need peace, and we talk about how to bring about peace. My message to all the ladies out there is, let's support one another. The two ministers have already talked about that. I just want to add my voice and say, let's support one another as we. South Sudanese women, we can't progress without economically empowering ourselves. We need to support women so that they can take care of their families, so that they can get children out of the streets, so that we can send children to school. So I'm appealing to everybody here, let's put our hands together. Programs that will empower women financially. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There are a few things that I'm being controlled from far. Someone unmute me. Okay, thank you. I think the way it's written in the and in bracket 5%. And I never hear much one day saying that this thing is to be calculated at last year. Anything 0.6 and above, you round it to the nearest decimal point, and that is 7. So for me, I feel that 35% of 16 is 5.6, and that should be 7 women. So that's 5. That should be that should be 6 women. So that to me is a strategy that women need to apply, and that strategy need to be applied across the board, Because there are situations where we have had that you cannot have a point of a person and it's rounded backwards. That's where women are losing. So I wanted to clarify on that. Number two is that the question of Ministry of Gender raising concern about disappointment. We are in a very complicated position. And I sympathize with the position of Ministry of Gender as an institution if it comes to raising concern about party appointing women in this coalition government. Because this government, the structure is interesting. You realize that the ministry that we expect to speak on our behalf has boundaries, because it's like when it becomes a party issue, then it's not going to, the message is not going to get to be taken across to those parties. So I think one of the things, and I remember what I heard Lillian very well, how other countries have sorted this kind of dilemma is by having a gender commission. Kenya has a gender equality commission. Zimbabwe has a national gender equality commission. South Africa has a gender equality commission. What is South Sudan seeing? Are we seeing something to borrow from there? Because then the commission is going to be semi-autonomous, and the commission is not necessarily going to be bound by party boundaries or party limitations. So perhaps that's something I think we need to think about. I am glad that we have a gender policy. I was just, when I was preparing to come for this discussion, I passed through my constitution and I looked at Article 16(4)(b), which talks about enacting laws to address the imbalances. The question is, how much have we used that article as South Sudan? I think those are some things that we should be able to pull out and moving forward. Otherwise, it has been really, really great being on the panel, and I feel honored to share the space with my sisters. I have listened and listened very well. Yes, the appeal has been there over and over again. It's something that we have had. Strategies need to be put in place, and we need to make environment for women conducive, not only for women who are getting into political spaces, but also women in other sectors. We have so many women out there. If you ask the coordinators or if you ask the members of South Sudanese Women Intellectual Forum, they'll tell you the wealth of resource that we have as women of South Sudan. How do we utilize that for benefit of the country without necessarily putting them in party frame? So for me, we need to think about women participation in a more broad way. Finally, I would say that nation building is a process, peace building is a process. In response to the question that what are we doing as individuals, actually it's a question that all South Sudanese should ask themselves. And I think it comes down to responsibility of citizenship. If we are citizens of this country, we have a responsibility to build our country. We have a responsibility to contribute towards peace and stability in the country. Therefore, everybody, every woman, every man out there has a responsibility. And finally, women issues should not be handled as issues on the periphery, but it should be in the center stage, because women are equal citizens of this country and they deserve that attention as in the mainstream. Thank you very much, Esther.
Great, thank you so much, Lorna, and all the panelists in the room for that. And I'll have the last intervention from Honorable Lillian Rizek before we close the panel. Could you kindly...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Okay. I wanted to conclude by a study on Women, Peace and Security Index that is being commissioned by Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And basically, the study is examining women's well-being in 167 countries. And along the dimension of protection, promotion, security, and justice, in a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being good and 10 being very bad. So South Sudan actually scored 163 out of 167. And not only in the Women and Peace and Security Index, if you look at all the data that are out there that examining the social well-being of women, South Sudan always at the lowest score. Having said that, I think we all have a role to play. We, especially the diaspora, as mentioned earlier, Dr. John Garang, at some point, he recognized the contribution of the diaspora. The African Union considered the diaspora as the 5th continent of the region. So we need to get rid of the phobia of the cluster from the diaspora participation, because I know there was a statement that diaspora are not trustworthy. So I think we have to clear that. We have to open the space. South Sudan needs to develop a national development agenda or policy that has the contribution on the diaspora. As mentioned before, South Sudan Women's Intellectual Forum is one example of a pool of resources, a pool of expertise that can be used. I just don't agree that all women have to really be in a political party, or they have to be in any forms of political agenda, but rather as an independent intellectual person, women have a right to participate in the country's development. And once again, I wanted to thank you so much for having me, and thank all my panelists and colleagues for hosting such an event. And thank you.
Great, thank you all. Thank you all so much for your interventions. Thank you to the audience that joined us in the room and to the that joined us live. Some key things that came up: the issue of participation of women has a lot to do with funding. We have the co-chairs of the Women, Peace and Security Working Group. We have had that and forward. We all a margin of success. We need to support the women in civil society need to think about how to make the crossover to political parties. I believe the message was passed across to a number of us in the room. Then there is a need to engage the diaspora because they are a part of us, and how can we leverage them for our building as a country? And we have also been reminded that we cannot progress without economically empowering women. Women's issues should not be at the periphery, but right at the center. Thank you all for joining us today in person and online. We apologize for starting late and ending late, but this is such a big discussion and it could take an entire day. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to my panelists who have been incredible, who have engaged, and we will from time to time engage in such healthy debates to see how we can move the agenda of gender equality and peaceful society forward. So I thank you all. It has been my pleasure to moderate this session, and have a good evening to all of you.